Thorough analysts have done yeoman's work to expose what appears to be evidence of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the Democrats, projecting an unreal history of his time in the U.S. National Guard. And there is a lot of evidence to indict him. But in their good detective work, many of these analysts have not dug into one or two other areas of his loose treatment of the truth. I'd like to put his statements under a microscope as well and expose two other dark and deceitful areas of his statements. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRCTV, and here's the story. As Fox News' Laura Ingraham, Walz's former battalion co-member, Retired Commander Sgt. Major Thomas Behrends, and the New York Post have noted, Walz's implication that he carried weapons of war during war in Iraq is untrue.
Weapons of war that I carried in war.
Right.
Again, what does that mean to most people? I mean, in language matters.
To most people, that would mean that he was actually in combat, carrying a weapon in a combat zone and getting combat pay and in a dangerous hostile environment where he was getting shot at. I mean, if he thinks Italy was a combat zone or a war zone and he was carrying that in war, he's delusional.
Others have pointed out that Walz not only didn't ask for a correction to a 2008 book called The Wellstone Way that claimed Walz served in Afghanistan, he openly endorsed the book on its cover. Others have unearthed indicting videos, one of which shows Walz visually nodding when others on C-SPAN misled audiences by puffing up his military record, and another video from 2009 that shows Minnesotans visiting Walz's state congressional office to inquire about his slippery implication that he served in Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom, when of course he never went to Afghanistan. He was working in Italy in support of the operation.
Congressman Walz is not an Afghanistan war veteran, is he?
He served in Italy in support of Operation Enduring Freedom.
Okay, but he didn't serve in Afghanistan, did he?
Not that I'm aware of.
And much of that well-deserved umbrage stems from a video that acted as the proverbial tip of the spear. Footage of Walz that has been posted by commentator and lawyer Mike Cernovich, showing Walz repeating the claim that he carried, quote, weapons of war in war, end quote, as part of his rhetorical push in front of a crowd to generate interest in more gun grabs and attacks on the right to keep and bear arms. And while detectives studying this Democrat demagogue's statements are correct to cite Walz for reiterating his false claim that he saw action and carried weapons of war in war, many of these justified critics appear to have overlooked other important problems with Walz's statements in that video.
I'll take my kick in the butt for the NRA. I spent 25 years in the Army and I hunt. And I gave the money back, and I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Clearly, Walz's claim of carrying weapons of war in war is to be cited as obnoxious nonsense. But he's packed a lot of other insulting and dangerous rhetoric inside his little brag. And the word choice shows just how much he loathes the right to keep and bear arms and how much he despises the U.S. Constitution. First, Walz claims to protect the Second Amendment with what he calls common sense legislation.
I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment.
What he actually proposes are a series of attacks on the Second Amendment, which is a federal prohibition of all infringements on the right to keep and bear arms. Whether the government mandates our background checks, which of course also folds in unconstitutional searches of personal information contrary to the Fourth Amendment, or CDC research that assumes first that man-on-man violence is like a viral pathogen that spreads rather than human action based on human choice.
But we can do background checks. We can do CDC research.
And also assumes that the CDC should collect gun violence data and falsely call it a public health problem. And overall assumes that the CDC is constitutionally sanctioned in the first place. Every item on Walz's checklist is an attack on the Second Amendment.
But we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states. And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
It's pretty easy to understand that something in the Constitution that overtly states the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed is not protected by infringements to the right to keep and bear arms. Does Walz think people are that stupid? Does he honestly think he can offer, without any kind of pushback, the equivalent of, I'm going to support your car alarm by disconnecting your car alarm and carjacking you? Unbelievable. And finally, Walz states he wants to prevent reciprocal carry.
We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
In other words, when people in their home states get gun licenses, which already are infringements on their rights, Walz doesn't want to see other states respect those licenses. It must be frustrating for this war hero to face the fact that the full faith and credit clause of the U.S. Constitution requires any state to offer reciprocal validity to any legal document from another state. Evidently, this man who repeatedly has sworn to protect and defend the U.S. Constitution isn't familiar with that very clear, easily readable portion of the U.S. Constitution. Walz seems to have a pretty bad memory. If one were to be less charitable, one might think he speaks in order to deceive. But one thing is certain, his statements don't comport with history or the U.S. Constitution. That makes him a danger and manifestly corrupt. And as the Harris team tries to wave magic wands to cover his tracks, claiming he merely misspoke, we can remember and beware. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like and subscribe. If you find this information valuable, please share the videos far and wide. You can find us on YouTube, where yes, they do censor us. Please follow us on Rumble, where they don't censor us, and share the videos as often as you can. Find the whole team at MRCTV.org. That's MRCTV.org. While you're there, check out the big fundraiser happening, and you can help out. And of course, check out the MRCTV store, where you'll find great items there to share with friends and family members. And of course, you can find us on TikTok, on Instagram, in Facebook, and on X. And if you want to follow me on Gab, I'm at Gardner Goldsmith there. And if you want to follow me on X, I'm at Guard Goldsmith. Thanks so much for watching and being interested in principles like this and exposing the fatuous nonsense of politicians like him. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.